and welcome to another episode of Dropping the True Crime Tea, the show that takes you deep into the lesser-known corners of true crime. I'm your host, Kirsty, and today we're journeying into a story so bizarre it barely sounds real. Picture the calm hills of Northern California, the wealthy towns of Marin County, and behind that quiet facade, a tiny cult whose leader believed he was God's chosen prophet, and who would stop at nothing to launch his own personal Armageddon. It was the summer of 2000, the kind of season when sunlight lingers over tree-lined streets and everyone thinks danger happens somewhere else. In early August, police in Marin County received a frantic call about gunshots in a small rental cottage. What they found inside would haunt them for years. On the bed lay a 45-year-old woman named Jennifer Villerin. Beside her was her friend, James Gamble, a 54-year-old visitor. Neither belonged there, and both were dead from gunshot wounds. The apartment belonged to Jennifer's daughter, Selena Bishop, who'd vanished without a trace. The door had been left wide open, like an invitation gone horribly wrong. No signs of forced entry meant one thing: the killer was someone who knew the place. Within hours, detectives were following a trail that would lead them far beyond Marin County to Concord, Sacramento, and the murky backwaters of the Delta. But first, they had to find Selena Bishop. Meet Glenn Taylor Helzer. To his victims, he was known simply as Jordan, a charming young man who swept a beautiful woman off her feet. In reality, he was a former stockbroker turned self-styled prophet who preached that the end of the world was at hand and that only he could save humanity. Glenn had grown up in a devout Mormon family in the Bay Area, but after falling into drug use and fringe New Age seminars, he was excommunicated. He emerged with a brand new message: there was no such thing as right or wrong. He called his followers the Children of Thunder, after a vision he claimed to have had in the desert. His brother Justin joined him, followed by a young woman named Dawn Godman, who fancied herself a good witch. Together, they formed a tiny cult with grandiose plans. Their master plan, codenamed Operation Brazil, was nothing short of insane. Glenn believed that by eliminating the top leadership of the Mormon Church, he could trigger a spiritual reset for billions of souls. He envisioned recruiting orphans from South America to carry out the assassinations. And once those leaders were gone, Glenn would step in as the one true prophet of the restored faith. Of course, massive international covert assassination teams cost money. And that's where things took a gruesome turn. In late July of 2000, Glenn and his followers targeted an elderly couple in Concord. Ivan and Annette Steinman were retired and wealthy, easy marks for a quick $100,000. Under the guise of an investment scheme, the cultists invaded the couple's home, drugged them, and demanded cash. When the victims complied, Glenn slit Annette's throat while Justin bludgeoned Ivan to death. With $100,000 in hand, Glenn faced a thorny problem. How do you launder blood money without leaving a paper trail? Enter Selena Bishop. Glenn convinced his unsuspecting girlfriend to set up bank accounts in her name to hold the checks from an ex-spouse. Trusting him implicitly, Selena complied. But once the money was safe, Selena herself became a loose end. On the night of August 2nd, Glenn lured her back to the cult's house. There, he knocked her senseless and carried out the most gruesome murder of all. He struck her repeatedly to stun her, then slit her throat in front of Dawn, forcing her to witness the ritual killing. The horror didn't end there. Selena's mother, Jennifer, was house-sitting that same night at her daughter's cottage up in Marin County. Afraid that Jennifer might connect him to Selena, Glenn and Dawn drove north, armed with a handgun, and shot Jennifer along with her friend James Gamble. In just 3 days, 5 innocent people were dead, and the Children of Thunder believed they were one step closer to triggering Armageddon. What happens when you think you've covered your tracks but neglect the currents of a winding river? Dawn and Justin dismembered the bodies of the Steinemans and Selena in a rented house, using a power saw and a chisel to remove dental evidence. They stuffed the remains into duffel bags and dumped them into the Sacramento-San Joaquin River Delta, believing the twisting waterways would swallow every trace. But on the 6th of August, a local fisherman noticed something strange floating near the bank: gym bags tied up and weighted down. Inside, police found the body parts and soon identified them through dental records and personal effects. The Steinemans, reported missing by worried neighbors, and Selena Bishop, now linked to the Marin County homicides, were reunited in tragedy. Meanwhile, the cottage murder in Marin opened a parallel inquiry. Fingerprints in the Steinmans' van matched Dawn and Justin. A hastily scrawled note in the Concord home bore the name Taylor Helzer. And friends of Selena recalled her boyfriend named Jordan. The two investigations merged, and police closed in. On the 7th of August, law enforcement surrounded the cult's Concord house. Justin and Dawn surrendered peacefully, caught off guard by the ferocity of the manhunt. Glenn, however, bolted through a back door. Cornered in a nearby home, he held a terrified woman at gunpoint, attempted to steal her car and her cash, then in a last-ditch effort cut off his own ponytail to avoid recognition. He didn't get far. Hours later, Glenn Helzer was in handcuffs, his vision of cosmic salvation in ruins. In 2004, the legal drama unfolded. Glenn pleaded guilty to avoid the death penalty, while Justin took his chances at trial. The prosecution laid out every gruesome detail: drugging Grandma and Grandpa, the torture, the ritual slaying of a young woman in front of her friend, the cottage shootings. They even demonstrated in court with a saw, like the one used to dismember the bodies. Their star witness was Dawn Godman, who testified in chillingly calm tones about how she watched severed heads and helped cover up the crime. She admitted she believed Glenn was fighting Satan himself. Justin's defense tried to paint him as a gentle soul under his brother's spell, but jurors had seen the evidence and heard Dawn's testimony. They convicted Justin and later recommended the death penalty, just as another jury had done for Glenn, who had already been condemned. Justin never lived to see it. In despair on death row, he took his own life in 2013. Glenn remains on death row in San Quentin, his prophecy of Armageddon unfulfilled. What do we learn from this tiny cult with enormous ambitions? That fanaticism can flourish anywhere behind closed doors, beneath the sunlit lawns of wealthy suburbs. A former stockbroker can become a murderous zealot. Science teaches us that belief alone does not protect against manipulation. And we remember the lives lost, the Steinmans, neighbors who once opened their door to strangers, a bright young woman named Selena, a mother in Marin County. Their stories fade in most tea. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of a lesser-known horror. If you found this episode gripping, please subscribe and leave a review. Next time, we'll unearth another obscure case you've probably never heard of. Until then, stay curious and stay safe. Keep sipping that tea.